They call them griots, the storytellers who have kept Black life, Black history, and Black tradition alive. In Africa, they were revered members of the tribes, spending their entire lives telling and retelling the long, long history of the race. Here in America, they have been everything from mamas to great aunts, sitting on front porches and rocking chairs, telling the stories as they shelled peas or patched quilts. Or they've been young professionals who have had one younger than themselves who have asked, how is it certain things have come to pass? And the stories from the griots have gushed out. What is it you want to know? Black life? Well, I don't know. We were talking about Black life in Port Arthur, about how things used to be, but by now, many stories had already been told. It was time for something else, another dimension. Yeah, well, let's see. There was a brief pause as Gilbert Harrison, aide to Mayor Bernice Sadler, but now a griot, pulled his memory for the familiar stories. The Port Arthur he was going to have to go back to was the Port Arthur where Malone's son sold hot tamales and Jones' hamburger joint stood on the corner of West 7th and Grannis Avenue. It was a time when there was segregation but plenitude within it, when there was a Grannis Avenue drugstore and a Kelly drugstore, both of which had pharmacies, and one of which, Kelly's place, had a fountain and a policy of delivering 10 cents worth of ice cream. It was when the West Side had 5 Black grocery stores, a jewelry store, and a bakery run by the Freemans that baked bread every day and delivered the fresh loaves to the grocery stores. A time when Black folks had their choice of 4 doctors and 2 dentists, the best hot meals in corner cafes money could buy, and the dream that the prosperity was only going to get better despite the white folks. Yes, it was a journey to go back. Did you know about the old underground pump station? No? Yeah, it was right at West 7th and Texas 82. It's Roosevelt Edition now, but there used to be a marsh out there. When I was a boy, I used to hunt snakes there. His mind had begun to wonder and remember the things that had made deep impressions when he was a boy. We were going to go on a tour, West Port Arthur, according to the memory of Gilbert Harrison. As the journey continued, he recalled where the churches were and where the Lincoln and Hollywood movie theaters stood. George Lacey could remember much the same way. His Port Arthur was a place where there were not yet 12 grades in the public school system. It was a time when Black folks could only play football at the stadium behind Franklin School once a year on Armistice Day, and were allowed to play at the new stadium at Thomas Jefferson High School once a day as well, on Thanksgiving, in the daytime, and on one side of the field only. Port Arthur has always been highly social, Lacey said. We had big people come here, people like Duke Ellington, Chick Webb, Lionel Hampton, Lou Rawls, Nat King Cole. They all came to the West Side Auditorium. That was on 9th Street and DeWalt Avenue. And yes, it was also called the Cotton Club. The griots were green. Harrison had almost said the exact same words. Across the street from the West Side Auditorium was a man named Artie DeWalt, and he had a stadium, and he used to bring the Black baseball teams to play. From the Negro League? Yeah, from the Negro League. They were completely uniformed, I remember. I was a young boy. DeWalt, he also said, was in the saloon business. Lacey's Port Arthur was a time when drainage was bad on the West Side, so when it rained, there were lots and lots of problems. I don't know. Seemed like when it rained, all the water would drain to the west side. You'd have to wade to church. That's right, wade to church. What did he wear, he was asked, to church when he had to wade to get there? Surely not his Sunday best. Oh, yes, he said, laughing over the phone. You just rolled up your trousers and took off your shoes. He recalled taking his girlfriend, who later became his wife, to his high school prom. He not only had to pull up his trousers, but had to pick her up, formal dress and all, and carry her to the waiting car. It was a Port Arthur that had not yet provided indoor toilets. So when the rain came, there was not only water to wade in, but raw sewage to wade around. Didn't get better until 1933, Lacey said. But West Port Arthur. Black folks didn't work at Texaco back then, he said, just at the Gulf, and no blacks did any skilled labor. They rode to work in the back of the streetcar that went down West 7th Street, right to the refinery or up to the docks where most blacks worked as longshoremen anyway. The highest paying jobs for blacks were longshoremen. They unloaded the ships at the Mexican dock and at the cotton dock. The story was flowing more easily as more memories lined up to be told. The old cotton dock is where the grain elevator is now. Yeah, they unloaded cotton and lumber and grain in Port Arthur. That stuff came in by rail and was taken out by ship to foreign countries. From the longshoremen came C.S. Eugene, prolific speaker, said Lacey, who spoke at political functions. The kitchens of Gulf produced Van Buckner, who learned what he did of politics from listening to the big-time folks as he served them. He only had a fifth-grade education, but he was one of the first black election judges in the state of Texas, and he and J.C. Ford and Matt Williams were some of the first blacks to go to the Democratic National Convention. That was a milestone, said Lacey. It was a time when blacks were only allowed to vote in the general election, not the primaries where the actual decisions were made. So when the black faces from Port Arthur showed up in El Paso for the convention and had the gall to demand to be seated, well, something had been done, sure enough. And then there was the beloved W.E. Sampson. Sampson wasn't from Port Arthur. He had traveled here from Grimes County, up near Navasota, but he was a king in the academic world. He was the principal of the West Side's only school, Lincoln, and he came and left with the belief that there was no room in the black race for failure. There were no such things as social promotion, said Lacey. I can remember kids who were 11 years old and in the first grade. He said there was one rule. If you weren't doing it right, you were doing wrong. He paused as he remembered back to the man and his philosophies. I'm glad he was like that, though, because if he wasn't, I don't think I would have gotten where I am today. So much for the griot. The story had begun to come, and in the tradition of the tradition, the words had started to gush. This was only one story, and it was time to go. It had been good to talk about West Port Arthur, the place that had been a little rough maybe, but judging from the words of the griots, good nonetheless.